Most people believe the human body breaks down because it is damaged by time, but in evolutionary history, time was never the problem. The body weakens, not because it is fragile, but because it was never shaped to remain strong once its task was done. Natural selection did not invest in durability beyond survival and reproduction. Bones thinning, organs failing, memory fading, these are not malfunctions. They are the cost of a body optimized for replacement, not preservation. We experience loss and decay as something tragic. Yet from evolution's perspective, nothing has been lost at all. So the question is not why the human body stops working. The deeper question is, why do we keep expecting it to last? Most people today grow up with a quiet expectation that the human body should remain reliable for as long as life continues. When strength fades, when joints stiffen, when energy no longer returns after rest, the experience is often framed as something going wrong. This idea feels natural now, but it would have sounded strange for most of human history. For early humans, the body was never expected to last long enough for gradual decline to even become noticeable. Survival was measured in seasons, not decades, and the absence of breakdown mattered far less than the presence of immediate function. In that world, the body did not appear to fail over time, because time itself rarely stretched far enough to reveal slow deterioration. What we interpret as decline today would have been invisible to the vast majority of our ancestors. The belief that the body is failing is therefore not ancient. It is a modern interpretation layered onto a biological system shaped in a very different context. When humans lived closer to environmental limits, the body was judged by whether it could walk, hunt, gather, give birth and protect, not by whether it could remain unchanged across many years. Once those tasks were fulfilled, there was no evolutionary pressure to preserve the body further. Archaeological remains support this quiet reality. Skeletal evidence from prehistoric populations shows lives that ended before chronic wear could fully manifest. Teeth wore down, bones healed imperfectly, and injuries accumulated. Yet the concept of a long, slow, physical decline did not define the human experience. The body was not monitored, compared, or expected to maintain a stable baseline. It was used, adapted, and eventually exhausted, often quickly. Only when human societies began to stabilize, when food became more reliable and survival extended across many decades, did the illusion of a failing body emerge. Longevity created comparison. Comparison created expectation. And expectation transformed natural biological limits into perceived defects. The body did not change. The context did. From a biological perspective, the human body still operates according to the same ancient priorities. It allocates energy toward growth, reproduction, and immediate survival, not toward indefinite maintenance. Cells repair damage just enough to keep functioning. Tissues adapt only as long as the cost remains acceptable. And systems are built to tolerate loss rather than prevent it entirely. None of this feels intuitive to modern humans who live long enough to witness gradual decline. Yet this mismatch between expectation and design explains why aging often feels like betrayal. The body seems to withdraw support just when life experience feels richest. But this sensation arises from cultural timing, not biological intention. In evolutionary terms, the body is not abandoning us. It is simply continuing a pattern that was never meant to extend into advanced age. When we say the body is failing, we are often comparing it to an imagined standard that never existed in nature. There was no original version meant to last unchanged. There was only a version meant to function briefly and effectively within harsh environments. As humans began to live longer, the body did not suddenly become flawed. Instead, human awareness expanded beyond the window the body was designed to support. The illusion of failure emerges precisely because modern life allows us to outlive the conditions that shaped our biology. Understanding this does not remove discomfort or loss, but it reframes them. The body's limits are not personal shortcomings. They are traces of a long evolutionary past still quietly present beneath modern expectations. The idea that the human body should remain stable over time did not arise from biology. It emerged from changes in how humans lived together. As small groups became settled communities, and as generations began to overlap for longer periods, people started to observe bodies across extended spans of life. Weakness, stiffness, and slowing were no longer brief transitions before death, but visible stages that unfolded slowly. This shift altered perception. The body was no longer judged only by what it could do in the present moment, but by how well it preserved past ability. Once memory extended further than survival, decline became noticeable. And once decline became noticeable, it invited interpretation. In early human environments, energy was scarce and unpredictable. The body learned to prioritize immediate use over long-term conservation. Muscles responded to demand, not longevity. Joints absorbed stress without expectation of decades of service. Organs functioned within narrow margins, sufficient for short lifespans shaped by injury, infection, and scarcity. There was no advantage in building excess durability into a body unlikely to outlive its environment. When living conditions improved, this ancient design remained unchanged. What changed was the human relationship with time. Longer lives created a new narrative. A body that once ended quickly now persisted long enough to reveal cumulative wear. Instead of accepting this wear as natural, societies began to view it as deterioration. The same biological processes were now observed through a different lens. What had been invisible became a problem to be explained. This reinterpretation intensified as medicine extended life further. Survival past reproductive years became common, then expected. The body's gradual loss of resilience began to conflict with the mind's growing sense of continuity. People remembered what their bodies once did and expected those abilities to remain. Yet memory itself outpaced biology. The mind could revisit past strength, while the body could not restore it. This gap widened with each passing decade, creating the feeling of being trapped inside a body that no longer cooperated. From an evolutionary perspective, nothing unusual was occurring. The body continued to follow the same principles it always had. It conserved resources by reducing repair where survival advantage was minimal. It tolerated inefficiency as long as basic function remained. It accepted gradual decline as an acceptable outcome, once reproduction and protection of offspring were complete. What felt like loss to the individual was simply the absence of further investment from natural selection. Fossil records and demographic reconstructions support this quiet pattern. Very few individuals in prehistoric populations lived long enough for slow degeneration to dominate daily life. When they did, physical limitations were expected and socially accommodated rather than questioned. There was no cultural promise of prolonged vitality. Strength belonged to youth, endurance to experience, and decline to time. Modern expectations reversed this order. Vitality became something to be preserved indefinitely, while decline was framed as avoidable or abnormal. This inversion deepened the illusion that the body was failing. In truth, it was never designed to maintain a constant state. It was designed to change, adapt, and eventually withdraw. The discomfort we associate with aging arises not from biology alone, but from the mismatch between ancient design and modern duration. The body remains honest to its origins. It is human expectation that has drifted. Recognizing this does not diminish the reality of physical loss, but it softens the sense of personal failure attached to it. The body is not breaking a promise. It never made one. As human lifespans lengthened, a subtle shift occurred in how people interpreted their own physical experience. Decline was no longer something observed only at the edge of life. It became a prolonged phase, stretching across years or even decades. This duration gave the impression of a process unfolding in slow motion, inviting constant attention. Pain lingered instead of passing quickly. Fatigue accumulated instead of resolving. The body became something to monitor rather than simply inhabit, yet this prolonged awareness did not come with a corresponding biological redesign. The human body continued to follow patterns shaped under conditions where long-term maintenance offered little advantage. It conserved energy by allowing gradual inefficiencies to remain. It prioritized immediate balance over future optimization. In this way, aging was not introduced by modern life. It was merely revealed by it. When we examine this through the lens of human origins, the contrast becomes clearer. Early human groups moved constantly, responding to seasonal changes and environmental pressure. Bodies were exposed to stress, injury, and scarcity, but rarely to extended inactivity or repetitive strain across decades. Muscles weakened quickly when unused, but life rarely allowed long periods without movement. Joints bore heavy loads, yet few survived long enough for cumulative damage to dominate daily experience. In this setting, decline existed but rarely defined identity. Modern environments changed this balance. Stability replaced movement. Predictability replaced urgency. The body began to age within conditions it was never shaped to interpret. This mismatch did not create new biological flaws. It simply allowed ancient limitations to surface more clearly. The illusion of a failing body deepened as humans began to compare themselves not to ancestors, but to their own past selves. Memory became a mirror that reflected loss. Strength was remembered precisely because it had once been reliable. Agility was mourned because it had once felt effortless. In earlier contexts, survival demanded constant adaptation, leaving little space for comparison across long spans of time. Identity was shaped by present capability, not by contrast with decades past. From an evolutionary standpoint, this internal comparison has no function. Natural selection responds to outcomes, not feelings. It does not preserve tissue to protect self-image. It does not slow decline to maintain continuity of identity. Once survival and reproduction have been achieved, there is no pressure to prevent gradual loss. This does not mean decline is intentional, it means it is tolerated. Biological systems are allowed to drift as long as they do not interfere with earlier success. The modern human experience places consciousness inside a body long after this point. Awareness continues to sharpen while physical capacity slowly fades. This divergence can feel unsettling, even unjust. Yet it reflects an unprecedented condition in human history. Never before have so many individuals lived long enough to experience such an extended gap between mental continuity and physical change. The body did not change its rules, time did. Understanding this does not erase discomfort, but it clarifies its origin. The sense of breakdown is not evidence of personal failure or biological error. It is the result of living beyond the window that once defined the human experience. The body remains aligned with its evolutionary past, while human life has moved forward. In that space between design and duration, the illusion of a failing body quietly takes shape. For most of human existence, survival was not a long story. It was a sequence of short challenges repeated day after day, finding food, avoiding injury, enduring weather, protecting the young. These demands shaped the human body far more than the distant future ever could. In such conditions, lasting long enough to reproduce was the primary measure of success. Anything beyond that offered little advantage to survival as a species. The body learned to invest its resources accordingly. Strength, speed, and resilience were front-loaded into early and middle life when they mattered most. There was no selective reward for preserving tissues, joints, or organs into old age, because few individuals reached it. This does not mean early human lives were constantly short, but it means that longevity was unpredictable. Accidents, infections, famine, and violence could end a life suddenly at any age. Under this pressure, a body that worked well now was far more valuable than a body built to endure later. Energy spent on long-term maintenance was energy taken away from immediate survival. From a biological perspective, this trade-off made sense. Muscles were designed to respond quickly to demand, not to resist decades of wear. Bones were strong enough to carry loads and absorb impacts, not to remain unchanged across a lifetime. Organs were efficient but not overbuilt. They performed their roles within narrow margins, sufficient for survival in harsh environments, but not buffered against prolonged decline. This pattern appears clearly in studies of hunter-gatherer populations and early agricultural societies. Life was physically demanding, yet the concept of wearing out slowly over time was not central. People either remained functional or they did not survive. The body was judged by its ability to meet present demands, not by its potential to remain intact years later. When illness or injury occurred, recovery was often incomplete. Imperfect healing was acceptable as long as basic function returned. There was no expectation of full restoration. This acceptance was not philosophical, it was practical. A body that could still move, work, and contribute was sufficient. From the viewpoint of natural selection, survival until reproduction, and sometimes long enough to assist offspring, was enough. Beyond that point, additional durability offered diminishing returns. The body's design reflects this logic. Systems that require constant energy input to remain pristine were never favored. Instead, the body tolerates gradual damage, compensates where possible, and continues functioning until it cannot. This strategy allowed humans to survive unpredictable environments with limited resources. It did not prepare them for long lives under stable conditions. When modern humans experience aging as a slow decline, they are witnessing the long-term consequences of a body optimized for urgency. The structure remains the same, but the context has changed. Survival is no longer measured in immediate outcomes, yet the body continues to operate as if it were. Understanding this reframes early human life not as tragically short, but as biologically coherent. The body was never meant to last because lasting was never the goal. Function was. In environments where survival depended on constant movement and rapid response, the human body learned to treat energy as something to be spent, not saved. Every calorie mattered. Every repair came with a cost. Under these conditions, natural selection favored bodies that could act decisively in the present rather than preserve themselves for an uncertain future. Healing occurred, but only to the extent necessary to restore basic function. There was little advantage in perfect repair when the next challenge might arrive before long-term damage could matter. This logic shaped how tissues responded to stress. Muscles rebuilt quickly after use, but only while demand remained. When activity stopped, strength faded without resistance. Bones adjusted to load, thickening where stress was frequent and thinning where it was not. This flexibility was efficient in dynamic environments, but it came at the expense of permanence. Structures that adapt easily also degrade easily once conditions change. From a modern perspective, this can look like fragility. From an evolutionary perspective, it was economy. Early human bodies were not designed to maintain peak condition. They were designed to remain just functional enough to meet immediate needs. Excess durability would have required constant energy investment, diverting resources away from reproduction, immune response, and survival. In a world of scarcity, such diversion would have reduced success. The same principle applied to internal systems. Organs operated close to their limits, optimized for efficiency rather than redundancy. The heart pumped sufficient blood to support activity, not to remain flawless across many decades. The kidneys filtered waste effectively, but without long-term safeguards against cumulative strain. The nervous system prioritized rapid response over long-term stability. These systems worked remarkably well within the time frame they were shaped for. Problems arose only when life extended beyond that window. Anthropological evidence suggests that when individuals survived into later life, their bodies often bore clear signs of accumulated stress. Joint degeneration, tooth loss, and healed fractures were common, yet these conditions did not define failure. They reflected a body that had been used fully. Communities adapted around these limitations, relying on shared labor and accumulated knowledge rather than physical strength alone. Longevity did not require a body free of wear. It required a body that could still participate in social life. In this context, the idea of preserving the body indefinitely would have seemed unnecessary. What mattered was whether a person could contribute, not whether their body remained unchanged. Modern expectations invert this relationship. We often measure health by absence of visible decline, rather than by functional adaptation. This shift deepens the sense that the body is breaking down prematurely. In reality, the body is following the same cost-saving strategies it always has. It reduces investment when returns diminish. It accepts gradual loss as an acceptable outcome once immediate goals have been met. This strategy allowed humans to survive unstable environments for tens of thousands of years. It did not prepare them for long-term comfort. When we interpret aging as a design flaw, we overlook the logic that once made survival possible. The body was never careless with its resources. It was precise. It invested where survival demanded it, and withdrew when it did not. This precision, shaped by urgency, explains why the body endures just long enough and rarely longer. When survival depended on uncertainty, the human body learned to tolerate loss rather than prevent it. Small injuries accumulated. Minor inefficiencies remained unresolved. Systems adapted around damage instead of eliminating it. This tolerance was not a weakness. It was a survival strategy. Repairing every flaw completely would have required continuous energy investment, something early environments rarely allowed. Instead, the body focused on maintaining enough function to continue moving, working, and reproducing. Anything beyond that threshold was unnecessary. This approach shaped how decline unfolded. Rather than sudden collapse, the body allowed slow drift. Strength diminished gradually, balance adjusted, sensory acuity softened. These changes did not signal failure in early human contexts. They signaled transition. A body that could no longer hunt might still gather. A body that moved more slowly might still guide, remember, or teach. The value of an individual did not depend solely on physical output. As long as basic function remained, the body had served its purpose. This perspective contrasts sharply with modern expectations, where function is often measured against youthful standards. Early human communities did not expect bodies to remain powerful indefinitely. They expected them to change. Decline was part of continuity, not a deviation from it. Biological systems reflect this acceptance. There is no internal mechanism that actively preserves peak condition once it is no longer essential. Instead, maintenance gradually gives way to compensation. Muscles rely more on coordination than force. Movement becomes more economical. The nervous system favors familiarity over speed. These shifts conserve energy and reduce risk in later life, even as overall capacity diminishes. From a biological standpoint, this is not neglect. It is adjustment. Fossil and skeletal records support this pattern. Older individuals often show evidence of chronic stress, healed injuries, and asymmetrical wear, yet their survival indicates that complete physical optimization was not required. Imperfect bodies persisted because social structures adapted around them. Knowledge, experience, and memory gained importance as physical strength waned. The body did not need to last unchanged. It needed to last long enough for transition to occur. In modern settings, this gradual shift is often misread. Because survival is no longer immediately threatened, decline feels unnecessary. The body appears to be withdrawing support without cause. But the cause lies deep in evolutionary history. The body continues to operate under rules shaped by urgency. Even when urgency is gone, it does not recognize extended comfort as a signal to invest further. It follows a simpler logic. Maintain function while it matters, then reduce cost. This logic explains why aging unfolds slowly rather than catastrophically. It also explains why the body rarely restores itself to former states. Reversal offers no evolutionary benefit once the primary tasks of life have been completed. What remains is not a broken system, but a conservative one, a system that spends only what it must. For those who live long lives, this economy can feel limiting. Yet it is the same economy that once made survival possible. The body endures not by resisting change, but by allowing it. In doing so, it remains faithful to the conditions that shaped it, even as human life extends far beyond them. The human body carries within it a bias toward immediacy. Its systems are tuned to respond to what is happening now, not to preserve what might be needed far in the future. This bias did not arise by accident. It was shaped by environments where delay could mean death. Hunger, cold, injury, and threat required quick resolution. A body that could act decisively in the moment had an advantage over one that conserved itself cautiously. As a result, human physiology favors rapid mobilization of energy, even when that mobilization carries long-term cost. Muscles recruit force quickly, stressing fibers that may not fully recover. Stress hormones flood the bloodstream to sharpen focus and reaction, even though repeated exposure strains organs over time. In short bursts, this system works remarkably well. Across decades, its cost becomes visible. From the perspective of early human life, this cost was acceptable. Most individuals did not live long enough for cumulative damage to outweigh immediate benefit. A fast response mattered more than a durable structure. Speed protected against predators. Strength secured food. Endurance allowed migration and persistence. The body was shaped to meet these demands, not to resist gradual wear. When we look at the skeletal remains of early humans, we see evidence of this urgency. Bones show adaptation to repeated stress rather than preservation of symmetry. Joints reflect use patterns rather than long-term protection. The body adjusted continuously, reinforcing what was used and letting other capacities fade. This adaptability allowed survival in shifting conditions, but it also meant that nothing was fixed. Structures existed only as long as they were needed. Once demand lessened, maintenance declined. In modern life, this same bias remains. The body still responds as if survival depends on immediate action, even when threats are abstract or prolonged. Stress responses activate without resolution. Muscles tense without release. Energy is spent without physical movement to justify it. Over time, this creates a quiet imbalance. Systems designed for short bursts are held in prolonged states, accelerating wear. The body does not recognize this as misuse. It follows rules written long before modern environments existed. This explains why many forms of decline feel disproportionate to effort. Pain appears without injury. Fatigue persists without exertion. These are not signs of a body failing to adapt. They are signs of a body adapting exactly as it was designed to, under conditions it was never shaped to interpret. The emphasis on urgency over duration also shapes how repair functions. Healing is efficient, but incomplete. Tissue regenerates enough to restore function, not to erase all traces of damage. Scar tissue replaces original structure. Strength returns, but rarely in the same form. This economy of repair conserves energy and allows rapid return to activity. It does not prioritize long-term perfection. In early human life, this trade-off was beneficial. In extended modern lifespans, it accumulates. What we experience as gradual breakdown is the visible residue of countless small decisions made by the body in favor of the present. Each decision made sense at the time. None were meant to support permanence. The body moves forward by spending itself. It always has. Only now do we live long enough to watch that spending add up. Urgency does not only shape how the body moves, it also shapes how it allocates care. In biological terms, care means repair, renewal, and maintenance. These processes are costly. They require energy, time, and biological precision. In environments where survival is uncertain, investing heavily in long-term maintenance offers little return. The human body, therefore, learned to limit how much it repairs itself. It fixes what is necessary to continue functioning, then moves on. This is why many forms of damage never fully disappear. Cartilage thins and is not restored. Nerve tissue recovers slowly, if at all. DNA damage accumulates quietly inside cells. These are not oversights. They are outcomes of a system that values continuity of action over restoration of original state. Early in life, repair appears more robust because the returns are higher. A younger body that heals quickly can return to survival and reproduction sooner. As life progresses, the balance shifts. Repair continues, but with diminishing intensity. The body becomes more selective. It prioritizes stabilizing what already exists rather than rebuilding what was lost. This shift feels personal, but it is not directed. There is no internal signal that says the body has stopped caring. There is only a gradual recalibration of investment based on ancient rules. From an evolutionary standpoint, a body that repairs perfectly but requires constant resources would be at a disadvantage. Perfection demands protection from entropy, and entropy is relentless. The human body instead accepts entropy and works around it. Cells divide knowing that errors will occur. Proteins fold knowing that some will misfold. Systems compensate rather than reset. This strategy allowed humans to persist under pressure. It did not aim for preservation across extended time. Modern medicine often reveals this bias. By contrast, treatments can slow damage, replace function, or extend life, but they rarely restore the body to an earlier state. Interventions work by supporting systems, not by undoing history. This mirrors the body's own logic. Once change has occurred, the priority becomes adaptation, not reversal. The expectation that the body should heal back to how it was reflects a modern hope, not an evolutionary pattern. In earlier contexts, survival after injury mattered more than completeness of recovery. A hunter with a healed but stiff joint could still contribute. A gatherer with reduced strength could still move. The body's role was not to maintain symmetry or youth, but to remain usable. As long as usability remained, further repair offered little advantage. This logic extends into later life. As systems slow, the body shifts from expansion to conservation. Muscle mass declines, but coordination improves. Reaction time slows, but decision-making often becomes more deliberate. These changes are sometimes described as decline, but they also represent rebalancing. The body reduces high-cost functions and leans on lower-cost ones. This transition is subtle and uneven. It does not follow a clean plan. It follows resource availability and accumulated strain. When we interpret these changes as failure, we apply expectations formed in a world very different from the one that shaped human biology. The body does not promise renewal. It promises continuity until continuity no longer offers advantage. What feels like neglect is often restraint. The body is not withdrawing care arbitrarily. It is following a logic that once kept humans alive when life was short and uncertain. That logic remains, even as life stretches far beyond its original frame. The preference for immediacy leaves a final, often unnoticed trace. The human body was never designed to anticipate its own future state. It reacts, adjusts, and compensates in the present, but it does not plan ahead in the way the human mind does. There is no biological mechanism that looks decades forward and prepares the body to remain comfortable or capable at that distance. Instead, each moment is handled locally. Damage is addressed only when it interferes with current function. Decline is allowed as long as basic balance can be maintained. This short horizon worked well in early human life. Future conditions were unpredictable, and long-term planning at the level of tissue and cells would have wasted resources. A body that prepared for a future it might never reach would have been less competitive in the present. As a result, human biology favors responsiveness over foresight. This becomes most visible later in life, when small adaptations made years earlier begin to interact. Movements repeated for survival shape joints in specific ways. Stress responses activated again and again leave lasting imprints on the cardiovascular and nervous systems. Each adjustment was reasonable at the time it occurred. None were made with the expectation that they would need to coexist for 70 or 80 years. When modern humans experience aging as an accumulation of unresolved issues, they are observing the long-term consequences of short-term solutions. The body did not fail to anticipate aging. It never attempted to. Anticipation beyond immediate survival was not selected for. This explains why decline often feels uneven and unpredictable. Some systems hold up longer than others. Some weaknesses appear suddenly, while others progress slowly. There is no master schedule guiding the process. The body responds only to what is demanded of it now, carrying the residue of past demands forward. In earlier human contexts, this residue rarely had time to compound. Lives ended before complexity accumulated. Today, complexity builds quietly over decades. The body becomes a layered record of its own responses, each layer shaped by urgency rather than longevity. This layered structure can feel fragile, but it is also resilient in a different sense. It reflects a system that survived countless immediate challenges by refusing to overcommit to a distant future. The cost of this strategy is paid only by those who live long enough to notice it. When viewed this way, aging is not the body drifting off course. It is the body remaining consistent with its original rules while human life has changed around it. The discomfort of aging arises from this mismatch. The body continues to solve short-term problems. The human mind lives inside long-term awareness. Between these two perspectives, tension emerges. Yet the body itself does not experience this tension. It simply continues to respond, moment by moment, as it always has. What we call wear is often the visible history of survival written into flesh and bone. The idea of repair suggests restoration, a return to an earlier state. In human biology, repair rarely works this way. What the body performs is closer to stabilization than renewal. Damage is contained, function is preserved, but original structure is seldom fully restored. This pattern is not the result of limitation alone. It reflects a deliberate balance shaped by evolutionary pressure. Perfect repair is expensive. It demands precise cellular work, extended time, and continuous energy input. In environments where survival was uncertain, such investment offered little advantage. A body that repaired just enough to continue functioning was more successful than one that aimed for perfection. As a result, human repair mechanisms evolved to be fast, sufficient, and economical, rather than thorough. This logic appears clearly in how tissues heal. Bone repairs itself by forming a callus, not by recreating its original architecture. The healed bone is often stronger at the break but less flexible around it. Muscle fibers regenerate, but alignment changes. Scar tissue replaces complex structures with simpler ones. These outcomes restore usability quickly, even if they reduce long-term efficiency. From the body's perspective, this is a reasonable trade. The immediate ability to move, work, or flee matters more than preserving optimal form. Over time, however, these small compromises accumulate. Each repair slightly alters structure. Each adaptation leaves a trace. Individually, these traces are insignificant. Together, they shape the experience of aging. The body becomes a record of past survival rather than a model of preserved youth. Early in life, the effects are subtle. The body compensates easily, redistributing load and adjusting movement. As years pass, the margin for compensation narrows. Systems that once absorbed imperfection effortlessly begin to show strain. This does not mean repair has failed. It means repair has reached the limits it was designed for. From an evolutionary standpoint, there was no pressure to extend repair capacity indefinitely. Once survival and reproduction had been secured, further investment offered diminishing returns. The body therefore continues repairing, but without upgrading. It maintains continuity rather than restoring potential. This explains why healing slows with age. The mechanisms remain, but their intensity declines. Cells divide more cautiously. Inflammation resolves more slowly. Recovery still occurs, but it is measured against stability, not restoration. In earlier human contexts, this was sufficient. Few individuals lived long enough for imperfect repair to become a dominant concern. Those who did, adapted socially. Physical limitations were accommodated through shared labor, altered roles, and accumulated knowledge. The body did not need to remain pristine. It needed to remain functional within a group. Modern life isolates repair from context. Individuals are often expected to maintain independence and physical capacity far beyond what ancient environments required. When repair no longer restores previous ability, the experience is framed as loss. Yet biologically, nothing unusual is happening. The body is continuing to apply the same cost-conscious strategies it always has. It repairs what threatens function and tolerates what does not. Perfect repair was never selected for because it did not improve survival under uncertainty. What remains is a system optimized for continuity under pressure, not for preservation across time. Aging makes this logic visible. It reveals the quiet compromises built into every act of healing. The body survives by accepting imperfection. It always has. Imperfect repair does more than restore basic function. It quietly reshapes how the body moves, balances, and distributes effort. Each time the body heals without fully recreating its original structure, it adjusts around the change. Muscles alter their recruitment patterns. Joints shift their range of motion. The nervous system recalibrates coordination to accommodate new limits. These adjustments are subtle, often unnoticed in the moment. They allow life to continue without interruption, but over long spans of time, they accumulate into lasting patterns. The body becomes increasingly shaped by how it has survived, rather than by how it once functioned. This process explains why aging rarely appears as a single failure. It emerges as a constellation of small changes that interact. A slightly stiffer joint alters posture. Altered posture changes load distribution. Changed load accelerates wear elsewhere. None of these steps are errors. Each is a rational response to immediate conditions. Together, they form a trajectory that the body never intended to manage over decades. In early human life, this trajectory rarely extended far. Death usually arrived before complexity compounded. Today, the trajectory continues. The body carries forward every compromise, layering them slowly. The result is not collapse, but constraint. Movement becomes narrower. Recovery takes longer. Balance requires more attention. These shifts feel like decline because they contrast sharply with earlier capacity. Biologically, they are the predictable outcome of repeated stabilization. Another consequence of imperfect repair is asymmetry. The body rarely experiences stress evenly. One side works harder, one joint compensates more, one system absorbs greater strain. Repair follows usage, reinforcing imbalance rather than correcting it. Over time, these asymmetries become fixed. They do not necessarily prevent function, but they shape comfort and efficiency. Early human bodies tolerated this easily. Physical roles were flexible. Tasks varied. Modern routines often repeat the same movements, amplifying imbalance. The repair system does not resist this repetition. It adapts to it. What emerges is a body finely tuned to its own history, not to an ideal form. This tuning can feel limiting, yet it reflects resilience. The body survives by learning from damage, not by erasing it. From an evolutionary perspective, this approach conserved resources. It allowed quick return to activity. It reduced vulnerability to future injury by reinforcing frequently used pathways. It did not aim to preserve versatility indefinitely. Versatility mattered less than reliability in familiar conditions. When modern humans expect the body to remain broadly capable across many decades, they are asking it to do something it was never shaped to do. The repair system does not preserve options. It commits to what has worked before. This commitment becomes increasingly restrictive with time. Aging, in this sense, is not random decay. It is the narrowing result of countless adaptive decisions made in response to past demands. The body becomes highly specialized in being itself. What feels like loss is often the closing of alternatives that are no longer supported. Understanding this reframes many experiences associated with aging. Stiffness, reduced flexibility, and slower recovery are not signs that the body has stopped repairing itself. They are signs that repair has taken a particular path and stayed on it. The body remains active, responsive, and adaptive. It simply adapts within a shrinking range. This narrowing reflects a long history of survival under pressure, not neglect. The body does not abandon repair. It completes it in the only way it knows how, by building on what already exists. Over time, this creates continuity, not renewal. It keeps life moving forward, even as possibility quietly contracts. There is a final consequence of imperfect repair that often goes unnoticed until later life. The body slowly loses its ability to respond creatively to new demands. Early in life, adaptation feels flexible. When injury occurs, the body reroutes function through multiple pathways. When strength is lost, other systems compensate. Over time, however, each repair narrows the range of available responses. The body becomes efficient at managing familiar stress, but less capable of adjusting to unfamiliar conditions. This is not because adaptation stops. It is because adaptation becomes increasingly specific. Repair builds on what already exists, reinforcing established patterns rather than reopening unused possibilities. In early human environments, this specialization was beneficial. Life followed recurring rhythms. Movements were familiar, tasks repeated across seasons. A body tuned to known demands could function reliably without needing broad versatility. The repair system supported this by strengthening commonly used pathways and allowing rarely used ones to fade. There was no penalty for reduced flexibility, because survival did not require constant novelty. Modern life, however, often demands adaptability long after the body has committed itself to a narrow set of patterns. When conditions change, when routines shift, when activity decreases, when new physical challenges arise, the body struggles not because it is weak, but because it has become highly specific. The repair system does not easily reverse specialization. It preserves what has worked before. As a result, recovery from new stress takes longer. Learning new movement feels difficult. Returning to previous capacity becomes unlikely. This experience is often described as aging, but it is more accurately the long-term outcome of cumulative repair decisions. Each decision favored stability over flexibility. Each made sense at the time. None anticipated decades of extended life. Another aspect of this narrowing is tolerance. The body learns what levels of discomfort it can function with and gradually adjusts its baseline. Pain that once signaled injury becomes background sensation. Stiffness that once limited movement becomes normal. This tolerance allows continued activity, but it also masks gradual decline. The body does not demand intervention as long as function remains possible. It adapts quietly, reducing sensitivity rather than restoring capacity. From an evolutionary perspective, this is efficient. It avoids unnecessary repair and conserves energy. In modern contexts, It can delay awareness until limitations are firmly established. This contributes to the feeling that decline appears suddenly, when in reality it has been unfolding slowly. Fossil evidence and studies of long-lived traditional societies suggest that this narrowing was once balanced by social structure. As physical flexibility decreased, roles adjusted. Older individuals contributed through knowledge, coordination, and decision-making rather than physical output. The body did not need to recover versatility because the environment adapted around it. Modern societies often place fewer accommodations around aging bodies, increasing the sense of restriction. Yet biologically, nothing has changed. The repair system continues to operate as it always has. It maintains continuity, not possibility. It stabilizes what exists rather than reopening what is closed. This reveals an important truth about why the human body was never designed to last. Lasting would require constant renewal of flexibility, not just survival of structure. It would require reopening pathways, restoring balance, and maintaining options across time. Such investment would have offered little advantage in early human life. The body therefore chose another path. It became durable enough to survive immediate demands and adaptable enough to adjust once or twice, but not endlessly. Aging reveals the limits of this strategy. What remains is not a body that has stopped working, but a body that has completed its pattern of adaptation. It continues to function within those limits, faithful to a design shaped by urgency, not endurance. Aging is often described as if it were a plan written into the body, a sequence of steps that unfold according to an internal clock. This idea feels intuitive, especially when changes appear predictable. Hair greys, strength fades, recovery slows. Yet from a biological standpoint, there is no single program directing this process. What exists instead is a long accumulation of side effects produced by systems designed for other purposes. The body does not age because it intends to, it ages because it survives. Every act of living generates small forms of damage. Cells divide and errors occur. Metabolism produces byproducts that strain tissues. Movement stresses joints and muscles. The body manages these consequences well enough to maintain function, but it does not eliminate them entirely. Over time, the residue remains. Aging emerges not as a goal, but as the visible record of this residue. In early human life, this record rarely grew large. Death often arrived before accumulation mattered. Under those conditions, there was no pressure to evolve mechanisms that prevented long-term build-up. Selection favored bodies that could function effectively now, even if that meant accepting gradual deterioration later. Aging, in this sense, is not a strategy. It is the tolerated outcome of countless successful short-term strategies. This distinction matters because it reframes how decline is understood. If aging were a program, it might be adjustable or reversible. As a side effect, it is neither intentional nor easily altered. Biological systems that limit aging would require constant investment to counteract entropy. Such investment would have offered little advantage in environments where few individuals reached advanced age. The body therefore evolved to manage damage locally and temporarily, not globally and permanently. This approach works remarkably well for survival and reproduction. It becomes problematic only when life extends far beyond its original horizon. Many features commonly associated with aging reflect this logic. Inflammation increases not because the body is attacking itself, but because repair systems remain active longer than before. Tissue stiffness grows as repeated stabilization replaces flexibility. Cellular turnover slows as systems become more conservative. None of these changes are coordinated toward an endpoint. They arise independently, shaped by local conditions and accumulated history. This is why aging looks different from one individual to another. There is no master design ensuring uniform decline. Each body carries a unique pattern of adaptation and wear. From an evolutionary perspective, this variability is expected. Selection does not refine traits that act after reproduction. It tolerates them as long as earlier success is secured. Aging therefore reflects what evolution ignored, not what it engineered. This understanding can soften the sense of inevitability often attached to decline. The body is not executing a plan that leads to deterioration. It is continuing to apply the same rules it always has, long after their benefits have been realized. The experience of aging arises when these rules persist beyond their original usefulness. It is not a failure of design, it is the absence of redesign. When we look at aging this way, it becomes clear why the human body was never designed to last. Lasting would require foresight, coordination, and sustained investment across time. Survival required none of these. It required responsiveness, efficiency, and tolerance of damage. Aging is what remains when those priorities succeed. Because aging is not a planned process, it does not follow a single direction or pace. It unfolds unevenly, shaped by where the body has spent its energy and where it has accepted compromise. Some systems endure longer than others. Some capacities fade early while others remain surprisingly stable. This unevenness often feels unfair, yet it reflects how biological investment is distributed. The body does not maintain itself as a whole, it maintains parts as long as they remain useful. When usefulness declines, maintenance becomes minimal rather than absent. This selective care explains why certain functions deteriorate while others persist. Vision may blur while hearing remains sharp. Strength may decline while endurance remains adequate. Memory may fragment while judgment deepens. These patterns are not coordinated. They emerge from independent systems responding to their own histories of use and strain. From an evolutionary perspective, there was no reason to synchronize decline. Uniform aging would not have improved survival. What mattered was that enough function remained for long enough. Beyond that, variation carried no cost. This explains why aging appears personal. Each body ages according to where it has invested most heavily. The hands of someone who worked physically show different changes than those of someone who relied on endurance or coordination. The cardiovascular system reflects decades of stress response and movement. The nervous system carries the imprint of repeated learning and adaptation. Aging becomes a biography written into tissue. This biography is not planned, it is accumulated. Another consequence of aging as a side effect is the absence of clear boundaries. There is no moment when youth ends and decline begins. Change is continuous and subtle. The body adjusts gradually, often without conscious awareness. Because there is no program marking transitions, the mind struggles to locate them. This creates the sense that decline arrives suddenly, when in fact it has been unfolding quietly for years. In early human contexts, this subtlety mattered little. Life was shaped by immediate demands, not long-term comparison. Modern life encourages reflection and measurement. We track performance, recall past capacity, and notice deviations. Aging becomes visible because attention extends across decades. The body itself remains indifferent to these comparisons. It continues adjusting locally, without reference to past or future states. This indifference can feel alienating. The mind seeks meaning and narrative, while the body follows chemistry and mechanics. Yet this separation is central to understanding why aging was never designed. Design implies intention and coordination. Aging arises where intention is absent. It is what happens when systems optimized for short-term success continue operating beyond their original scope. Even efforts to slow aging often reveal this limitation. Interventions may support specific systems, but they rarely restore global balance. Treating one pathway can expose strain in another. Extending function in one area does not erase accumulated history elsewhere. This reflects the decentralized nature of aging. There is no single switch to turn off because there was never a single switch turned on. Aging persists because it is woven into the normal operation of living systems. When survival succeeds repeatedly, aging follows. It is not a destiny imposed by design, but a trace left by persistence. The human body was never built to carry that trace indefinitely. It carries it only as long as life continues to demand it. Because aging is a side effect rather than a plan, the body never developed a clear endpoint for decline. There is no internal signal that marks when enough aging has occurred. No mechanism that neatly closes the process. Instead, aging continues as long as life continues, shaped by the same rules that governed earlier survival. Systems that still function are maintained at a minimal level. Systems that struggle are compensated for rather than rebuilt. The body does not attempt to restore youth, because youth was never a state meant to be preserved. It was a phase shaped by high investment and high return. Once that return diminishes, investment gradually withdraws, not abruptly, but quietly. This gradual withdrawal often feels confusing to the human mind. Effort continues, attention remains, desire to function persists, yet the body responds with increasing restraint. Energy is conserved, risk is avoided, recovery becomes cautious. These shifts are sometimes interpreted as surrender, but biologically they are protective. A body that reduces ambition late in life lowers the chance of catastrophic failure. Slower movement reduces injury, lower muscle mass reduces metabolic demand, reduced flexibility limits exposure to unfamiliar strain. These changes are not designed to extend performance. They are designed to extend stability. In early human contexts, this shift towards stability likely increased the chance of surviving unpredictable events long enough to remain socially useful. An older individual who avoided unnecessary risk could still contribute through memory, coordination, and guidance. The body's restraint supported this role. From this perspective, aging is not simply loss, it is reorientation. Capacity narrows, but reliability within that narrowed range increases. Movements become economical. Habits become efficient. The body favors what it knows it can sustain. This reorientation becomes visible only in long-lived populations. When most lives were short, the transition was brief or unseen. Today, it unfolds slowly, giving the impression of prolonged decline. Yet the underlying logic remains consistent. The body is not trying to maintain peak performance indefinitely. It is trying to remain viable under diminishing resources. Another feature of aging as a side effect is that it cannot be fully reversed without changing the fundamental rules of biology. Any attempt to restore youth would require continuous investment across all systems, counteracting entropy at every level. Such a system would be fragile, costly, and vulnerable to failure. Evolution did not favor it. What it favored was robustness through tolerance, not perfection through control. Aging persists because life persists, and life generates change. The body accommodates that change by narrowing, stabilizing, and conserving. When modern humans experience this as frustration, they are responding to a mismatch between expectation and design. Expectation imagines maintenance. Design delivers adjustment. The body does not aim to last forever. It aims to remain coherent for as long as it must. Aging marks the point where coherence matters more than expansion. This is not the body giving up. It is the body completing its role. What remains is not an unfinished design, but a finished one, still operating within the limits that once ensured survival. Standing upright is often celebrated as one of humanity's greatest evolutionary achievements. It freed the hands, expanded the visual horizon, and reshaped how humans interacted with their environment. Yet this shift came with costs that were never fully resolved. The human body did not redesign itself from the ground up for upright posture. It adapted incrementally, layering new demands onto older structures that evolved for a different way of moving. The result was a body capable of remarkable feats, but one that carried hidden strains from the moment it stood. The spine, originally shaped to support movement on four limbs, was reoriented into a vertical column. Curves emerged to balance weight, absorbing shock and maintaining stability. These curves worked well enough to allow walking, running, and endurance travel. They did not eliminate stress. They redistributed it. Over time, compression became constant. Discs bore weight they were never meant to carry continuously. Small imbalances in posture translated into uneven pressure that accumulated quietly. In early human life, this rarely mattered. Bodies moved constantly. Load shifted. Rest came through varied activity rather than prolonged sitting or static strain. Wear occurred, but few lived long enough for it to dominate daily experience. The same pattern appears in the hips, knees, and feet. Upright walking placed enormous demands on joints that once shared weight differently. The hip became a central hinge, balancing mobility and stability. The knee absorbed repeated impact with each step. The foot transformed into a complex structure capable of both support and propulsion. These adaptations were efficient, but not generous. They worked within narrow margins. Small deviations in alignment, muscle balance, or load distribution produced gradual stress. Each step was survivable. Millions of steps left traces. Natural selection tolerated this because the benefits of upright movement were immediate and profound. The ability to travel long distances, carry food, and scan the environment improved survival dramatically. The long-term cost to joints and connective tissue was irrelevant in a world where few reached advanced age. The body gained reach and endurance at the expense of durability. This trade-off becomes visible only later in life, when accumulated strain surpasses the body's capacity to compensate. Pain, stiffness, and reduced mobility are often interpreted as breakdown. Biologically, they are the delayed cost of a successful adaptation. The body did not fail to protect itself. It prioritized what mattered most at the time of selection. Upright posture also altered circulation and organ support. Blood had to be pumped against gravity more consistently. Valves became essential. Pressure gradients changed. These systems adapted well enough to function across active lives, but they were never optimized for prolonged stillness or extended lifespan. The modern experience of back pain, joint degeneration, and circulatory strain reflects this ancient compromise. Standing upright allowed humans to thrive. It did not promise comfort across decades. The body accepted this exchange without hesitation because survival demanded it. Only now, living far beyond the conditions that shaped us, do we feel the full weight of standing tall. Upright posture did not only change how weight moved through the skeleton, it changed how the body balanced tension over time. When humans began walking on two legs, stability depended less on distributed support and more on continuous muscular adjustment. Small muscles worked constantly to keep the body aligned. Tendons absorbed repetitive strain. Ligaments maintained position under load that never fully disappeared. This system functioned well during movement, when forces shifted and circulation remained active. It was less suited to long periods of stillness. In early human life, prolonged stillness was rare. Rest occurred in varied postures, often close to the ground, with frequent transitions between movement and pause. Modern life introduced extended sitting and standing without movement, exposing the limits of an upright body designed for motion. Over decades, static strain accumulates, muscles fatigue unevenly, supporting tissues lose elasticity, balance becomes more fragile. These changes do not signal sudden failure. They reveal how finely tuned the system always was. Upright balance relies on constant correction rather than structural certainty. As correction slows with age, small deviations persist longer, compounding strain. The nervous system also bears part of this cost. Maintaining vertical posture requires continuous sensory feedback and motor adjustment. Vision, inner ear signals, and proprioception must remain coordinated. When any component weakens, balance suffers. Early in life, redundancy compensates. Later, as sensory systems degrade at different rates, coordination becomes less reliable. This can feel like loss of control, but biologically it reflects the thinning of safety margins. The body continues to stand and walk, but with less tolerance for error. In evolutionary terms, this was acceptable. Few individuals lived long enough for balance deterioration to become a dominant threat. Falls were risks, but survival was already uncertain. Selection favored mobility and reach over long-term stability. The same logic applies to how upright posture affects internal organs. Gravity reshaped how organs are supported and positioned. Muscles and connective tissue adapted to hold them in place, but this support weakens with time. Prolapse, herniation, and pressure-related discomfort appear not because structures fail abruptly, but because they were never reinforced for prolonged vertical load. These conditions were rare concerns in early human life. Today, they are common experiences of aging. The body did not anticipate decades of standing, sitting, and carrying weight without interruption. It adapted just enough to function during active years. Upright posture also altered how the body absorbs shock. The spine became a spring, transferring impact from the ground upward. Over millions of steps, this transmission leaves subtle marks. Vertebrae compress, discs thin, nerve spaces narrow. None of these changes occur suddenly. They unfold quietly as the body continues to move as designed. Aging makes this cumulative process visible. What once felt effortless becomes deliberate. Movement requires attention. Posture demands care. These experiences are not signs that standing upright was a mistake. They are reminders of the trade that made human life possible. The body gained freedom of movement and use of the hands by accepting long-term strain. It was never meant to carry that strain indefinitely. The long-term effects of upright posture extend beyond bones and muscles into how the body experiences space and movement itself. As humans age, the effort required to remain upright subtly increases. What was once automatic becomes managed. Small adjustments that once occurred without awareness now require attention. This shift does not happen because posture suddenly worsens. It happens because the systems that silently corrected imbalance lose speed and redundancy. The body continues to stand, but it does so with fewer invisible supports. In early human life, this narrowing mattered little. Movement was frequent, varied, and embedded in daily survival. The body rarely stayed in one position long enough for imbalance to dominate. Modern life reduces variation. Repetition replaces diversity of movement. Chairs, shoes, and flat surfaces limit the range of postural challenges. The upright body adapts to these constraints by narrowing its strategies further. Over time, this creates fragility, not because the body is weak, but because it's been shaped to function within a smaller envelope of conditions. Another consequence of upright living is how it reshapes perception of effort. Gravity becomes a constant companion, subtly resisted with every step and every moment of standing. In youth, this resistance feels negligible. With age, it becomes noticeable. Fatigue appears earlier, recovery takes longer, the body conserves energy by reducing unnecessary movement and by favoring stability over exploration. This conservation is often misread as decline. Biologically, it is an efficient response. An upright body that minimizes excess movement reduces risk and strain. The cost is reduced spontaneity. Upright posture also changes how humans fall. When balance is lost, distance to the ground is greater, and impact is concentrated. Early human environments accepted this risk. Falls were one of many threats, and survival already involved constant danger. There was no evolutionary incentive to redesign the body to prevent injury from falls late in life. Instead, the body learned to move cautiously as balance margins shrank. Slower gait, shorter steps, and wider stance are not failures. They are adaptations to an upright form, operating closer to its limits. Aging reveals these adaptations because time allows limits to be reached. When people experience fear of falling, joint pain, or instability, they are encountering the edge of a design that worked remarkably well within its original context. The body was never meant to remain upright effortlessly across many decades. It was meant to stand long enough to live, reproduce, and contribute. Once those tasks were complete, further refinement offered no evolutionary reward. The upright body, therefore, carries no mechanism to restore lost balance margins fully. It compensates, it slows, and it simplifies movement. These responses extend viability, not performance. In modern life, where extended independence is expected, these adaptations can feel restrictive, yet they reflect consistency, not breakdown. The body is still solving the same problem it always has: how to remain coherent under gravity with limited resources. Standing upright gave humans reach, vision, and freedom. It also imposed a quiet tax that is paid slowly, step by step, across time. Aging makes that tax visible. What we experience as wear is the long-delayed cost of standing tall in a world that now allows us to stand far longer than our bodies ever anticipated. The human brain occupies a strange position within the aging body. It is both deeply biological and uniquely detached from physical decline. While muscles weaken and joints stiffen, the brain continues to accumulate experience, memory, and understanding. This divergence creates a tension that few other species experience. The brain was shaped to guide survival in unpredictable environments, learning quickly from danger and opportunity. It was not shaped to coexist with a body that steadily loses capacity over many decades. As a result, the brain often outlives the body it evolved to manage. This does not mean the brain escapes aging. It means it ages differently. Neural systems prioritize adaptability and learning early in life, when survival and reproduction depend on rapid adjustment. Later, these systems shift toward efficiency and conservation. Pathways that have been reinforced repeatedly become dominant. Novel learning slows, but pattern recognition often deepens. The brain becomes less flexible in some ways and more stable in others. This pattern mirrors the body's broader strategy: reduce cost, preserve coherence, avoid unnecessary risk. Yet the brain also carries awareness across time. It remembers earlier strength, earlier speed, earlier ease of movement. This memory persists even as the body changes. In early human life, this gap was brief or irrelevant. Few individuals lived long enough for extended reflection on physical decline. Experience accumulated, but bodily change often ended life before deep tension emerged. In modern humans, this gap widens. The brain continues to evaluate, compare, and anticipate long after the body's design horizon has passed. This creates a uniquely human experience of aging. The body adjusts quietly, while the brain observes the adjustment and assigns meaning to it. The brain asks why movement feels different, why recovery takes longer, why effort costs more. The body offers no explanation. It simply responds according to ancient rules. This mismatch can feel unsettling, even distressing. Yet it arises not because the brain was designed to outlast the body, but because human lifespan expanded faster than biological integration. The brain's ability to project into the future and reflect on the past becomes more pronounced with age. Memory deepens. Perspective widens. At the same time, the body's ability to support the brain's intentions narrows. Plans require more effort. Desire meets resistance. This is not failure of either system. It is divergence. The brain continues to operate in long temporal arcs. The body remains focused on present stability. From an evolutionary standpoint, this separation was never tested across long lifespans. Selection did not refine harmony between long-lived cognition and declining physical capacity. It did not need to. For most of human history, the overlap was brief. Today, that overlap defines aging. The brain remains alert inside a body that increasingly prioritizes caution. Understanding this helps explain why aging often feels like a negotiation rather than a simple decline. The brain carries forward intention, memory, and meaning. The body carries forward structure, limitation, and adaptation. Together, they reveal a design that succeeded at survival, not at lasting harmony across time. As the body narrows its range of movement and tolerance, the brain quietly adapts its priorities. Attention shifts away from speed and novelty toward prediction and control. Where younger brains explore widely, older brains rely more heavily on what is already known. This is not simply habit. It reflects a deep biological adjustment. Learning new physical patterns becomes costly when the body's margin for error is small. The brain responds by favoring familiarity, reinforcing routines that reduce risk. This shift often feels psychological, but it is tightly linked to physical change. The brain senses constraint long before it is consciously acknowledged. It adjusts behavior to preserve coherence between intention and capacity. In early human life, this alignment was brief and efficient. The brain learned quickly, acted decisively, and rarely needed to manage prolonged decline. Modern longevity transforms this alignment into a long negotiation. The brain must continuously recalibrate expectation to match a body that no longer expands its abilities. This recalibration does not happen once. It happens repeatedly, often unnoticed. Goals are revised, movements become more deliberate, decisions factor in recovery time and effort. The brain does not surrender ambition, it refines it. This refinement is often mistaken for loss of motivation. Biologically, it is conservation. The brain reduces unnecessary expenditure to maintain stability. This strategy mirrors how the body reduces repair intensity with age. Both systems converge on the same principle: protect what remains functional. Another consequence of this adaptation is increased reliance on memory. When physical exploration becomes less reliable, the brain draws more heavily on past experience. Situations are evaluated through comparison rather than trial. This can feel like wisdom. It can also feel like limitation. In evolutionary terms, it is both. Knowledge gained through experience allowed older individuals to contribute without physical risk. The brain became a repository of strategies that reduced danger for the group. This role was valuable even as physical capacity declined. The brain's persistence therefore had social importance, even if the body's role narrowed. Modern life often separates these functions. physical contribution remains emphasized, while experiential knowledge is undervalued. This separation intensifies the feeling that the brain is trapped in a body that no longer serves it. Yet biologically, the brain is doing what it has always done, adapting behavior to physical reality. The tension arises because modern contexts extend this adaptation across decades. The brain continues to care, plan, and reflect. The body continues to restrict. Neither system is malfunctioning. They are operating under different timelines. The brain's timeline stretches forward and backward through memory and anticipation. The body's timeline remains local, focused on immediate balance and safety. This divergence explains why aging often feels mentally active but physically constrained. Thought remains expansive. Action becomes selective. The brain does not age away. It ages into a different role. It becomes less concerned with expansion and more concerned with coherence. Understanding this reframes cognitive aging. Slower processing, increased caution, and reliance on routine are not simply decline. They are adaptations to a body that no longer tolerates error easily. The brain remains responsive, but it responds within narrower boundaries. It learns to live inside limits it did not evolve to manage for so long. In this sense, the brain outliving the body is not a flaw. It is a consequence of human longevity exposing a gap that evolution never needed to close. As this divergence between brain and body continues, a quieter transformation takes place in how experience is felt. The brain begins to place greater value on internal continuity than on external capability. Sensation, reflection, and meaning gain weight as action becomes more selective. This shift is often subtle, and, quote, it does not announce itself as change. It unfolds through small preferences, choosing familiarity over novelty, depth over range, stability over expansion. The brain adapts not by resisting physical limits, but by reorganizing how life is experienced within them. In early human life, this reorganization was brief. Survival pressures dominated until the end. There was little time for extended inward adjustment. In modern longevity, the brain has decades to renegotiate its relationship with the body. This renegotiation shapes how aging is lived from the inside. The body restricts movement, but the brain extends narrative. Memory becomes richer not because the brain grows stronger, but because experience accumulates without being erased by constant novelty. Patterns repeat. Meaning consolidates. The brain trades speed for coherence. This trade can feel like loss when measured against youth. It can also feel like arrival when measured against instability. From an evolutionary perspective, this inward shift had value. Older individuals who could no longer compete physically could still contribute through guidance, judgment, and social memory. The brain's ability to remain engaged while the body slowed allowed knowledge to persist across generations. This persistence did not require physical strength. It required continuity of attention and recall. The body's decline did not threaten this role. In fact, it supported it by reducing exposure to risk. Modern life complicates this balance. Physical independence is often treated as the primary marker of worth. When the body narrows, the brain's shift inward can be misread as withdrawal. Biologically, it is not withdrawal. It is adaptation to a body that no longer rewards outward expansion. The brain seeks coherence where action becomes costly. Another consequence of this shift is altered perception of time. As physical novelty decreases, days feel less fragmented. Memory links moments more tightly. Time can feel both slower and fuller. This experience is not unique to aging, but it becomes more pronounced when the body limits constant change. The brain fills space left by reduced activity with reflection and integration. This integration can feel unfamiliar in cultures that value constant movement, yet it reflects a capacity the brain always had, one that only becomes central when physical urgency fades. The brain does not outlast the body by accident. It persists because its primary function is not movement, but meaning-making in service of survival. Once survival no longer depends on constant action, meaning becomes its main terrain. The body's decline exposes this shift. What remains is not a brain trapped in a failing body, but a brain completing a role that was always secondary until time allowed it to emerge. Aging reveals this role by removing alternatives. The human body was never designed to last. The brain was never designed to stop responding. Between them, a long life becomes a space where intention adapts to limitation, and awareness continues even as capacity contracts. Modern humans live far longer than the body originally expected. This extended lifespan did not emerge from a redesign of human biology. It emerged from changes outside the body: safer environments, stable food supplies, medical intervention, and social organization. The body itself remains largely the same as it was tens of thousands of years ago. Its systems still operate under assumptions shaped by short, uncertain lives. When life extends beyond those assumptions, a quiet mismatch appears. The body continues to allocate resources as if time were limited, while the surrounding world removes many immediate threats. This mismatch explains why long life often feels like borrowed time rather than sustained balance. In early human history, reaching later life was possible but rare. When it happened, it occurred without expectation of comfort or prolonged independence. Survival past midlife was not anticipated, and therefore not supported by specialized biological investment. Modern longevity changed expectation without changing design. The body now survives conditions it was never shaped to interpret. It endures not because it is optimized for longevity, but because external support compensates for its limits. Medicine stabilizes systems rather than redesigning them. Nutrition reduces scarcity rather than altering metabolism. Shelter protects without reshaping structure. Each layer of support allows life to continue, but none remove the body's underlying logic. As a result, extended life reveals accumulated compromises more clearly. Systems that were sufficient for earlier survival now operate closer to their limits for longer periods. The heart beats billions more times than originally anticipated. Joints carry weight across decades of repetition. The nervous system maintains vigilance long after immediate threats have faded. These systems do not fail suddenly. They persist until compensation can no longer keep pace. This persistence is often experienced as gradual decline, but it is more accurately prolonged exposure to strain. From an evolutionary perspective, there was no pressure to smooth this experience. Selection did not favor comfort in extended old age, because extended old age was not common. The body therefore lacks mechanisms to evenly distribute wear across a long lifespan. Instead, wear accumulates where use has been greatest. Longevity turns use into history. This history becomes visible as asymmetry, stiffness, and reduced tolerance. Modern societies often interpret these signs as problems to be solved. Interventions aim to slow, manage, or mask decline. These efforts are valuable, but they do not change the fundamental relationship between design and duration. They extend function without redefining purpose. The body continues to operate according to rules shaped by urgency, even as urgency disappears. This explains why long life can feel both miraculous and fragile. It is miraculous because survival persists far beyond original expectation. It is fragile because design never adjusted to match that persistence. Understanding this reframes modern aging. It is not the body failing to keep up with progress. It is progress exposing the limits of a body that succeeded under very different conditions. Long life was achieved externally. Internally, the body remains ancient. When longevity is extended without biological redesign, the body enters a phase it was never shaped to navigate alone. Systems that once worked in balance now depend increasingly on external support. Medical care regulates blood pressure, stabilizes heart rhythm, and manages metabolic strain. Glasses correct vision that no longer adapts. Joint replacements substitute for structures worn beyond tolerance. These interventions do not reverse aging. They suspend its most immediate consequences. The body continues aging beneath them, following the same ancient logic. What changes is the threshold at which failure becomes fatal. Modern life raises that threshold, allowing decline to unfold more slowly and visibly. This visibility transforms aging into a prolonged experience rather than a brief transition. In early human life, aging rarely dominated attention. Survival challenges overshadowed gradual change. Today, stability removes those challenges, leaving decline exposed. The body's limitations become central not because they have increased, but because competing dangers have diminished. This creates the impression that the body is struggling more than before. In reality, it is being asked to persist under conditions it was never meant to sustain. Extended longevity also alters how time is felt inside the body. Recovery that once needed days now needs weeks. Adjustments that once resolved quickly now linger. The body adapts by slowing its pace. Movements become deliberate. Rest becomes essential rather than optional. These changes are often framed as weakness. Biologically, they are strategies to preserve coherence under prolonged strain. The body chooses caution over repair because repair offers diminishing returns when wear is widespread. It limits exposure to damage rather than attempting to eliminate damage entirely. This strategy keeps systems functioning, but it reduces tolerance for excess. Modern expectations often conflict with this logic. Extended life encourages continued productivity, independence, and physical engagement. The body responds by narrowing activity to what it can sustain. The resulting tension feels like resistance, yet it reflects the body's attempt to remain stable within ancient limits. Another consequence of externally extended life is fragmentation. Different systems age at different rates, and interventions often target them separately. One system is supported while another weakens. This creates uneven experiences of aging. A person may feel mentally alert but physically constrained, or physically capable but cognitively fatigued. There is no internal mechanism to harmonize these trajectories. Evolution did not need to coordinate them beyond reproductive years. Extended life exposes this lack of coordination. From a historical perspective, this fragmentation is new. Never before have so many humans lived long enough to experience prolonged, uneven aging. The body did not evolve to integrate extended longevity smoothly. It evolved to survive long enough for continuation of the species. Modern life changed the outcome without changing the process. Aging becomes a long negotiation between ancient biology and contemporary support. The body accepts help, but it does not reinterpret itself. It continues to operate as if time were short, conserving resources and tolerating decline. Understanding this helps explain why longevity feels incomplete. Life lasts longer, but design remains the same. The human body persists not because it was meant to last, but because the world has learned how to keep it going. As modern life continues to extend survival, the body gradually shifts from being the driver of life to being something that must be managed. This transition is subtle, but it marks an important boundary. In earlier human history, the body dictated rhythm. Hunger, fatigue, injury, and weather set the pace of existence. Today, external systems regulate many of these forces. Meals arrive regularly. Climate is controlled. Medical care intervenes before crisis. The body no longer sets limits as sharply, yet its internal logic remains unchanged. It continues to signal caution, conserve energy, and reduce repair as strain accumulates. This creates a quiet tension between external stability and internal restraint. The body survives longer, but it does so by narrowing its tolerance rather than expanding it. Over time, this narrowing becomes a defining feature of extended life. Activities once performed without thought now require planning. Recovery shapes decisions. Energy must be allocated carefully. These changes are often interpreted as decline of will or strength. Biologically, they represent the body asserting boundaries it always had, but rarely needed to express for so long. The world has become safer, but the body has not become more durable. It copes by simplifying. It favors predictable routines. It limits exposure to unfamiliar strain. This simplification preserves coherence under extended duration, but it also reduces flexibility. In early human contexts, this phase was brief. Once simplification dominated, life often ended soon after. Today, simplification can persist for decades. The body enters a prolonged state of maintenance without renewal. It does not collapse. It stabilizes at a lower level of demand. This stability allows continued existence, but it changes how life is lived. Experience becomes structured around preservation rather than expansion. This shift is not pathological. It is consistent with a system designed to survive uncertainty, not to flourish indefinitely under safety. Another effect of extended life is the accumulation of bodily memory. Every injury, adaptation, and compromise remains present. The body carries its past forward without erasing it. External support keeps systems functioning, but it does not clear history. Over time, this history weighs more heavily. Movements are shaped by what has hurt before. Choices are shaped by what takes longer to recover from. The body becomes cautious, because caution is efficient. From an evolutionary perspective, this efficiency once increased the chance of survival through unstable conditions. In modern life, it becomes a long-term state. Aging, in this sense, is not just biological change. It is the prolonged expression of a survival strategy operating without its original endpoint. The body was never designed to last, but it was designed to adapt long enough to matter. Modern longevity stretches that adaptation far beyond its intended frame. What emerges is a body that continues to function, but only by steadily reducing the range of life it can comfortably support. This reduction is not failure. It is the body remaining faithful to its design while the world around it has changed. Long life reveals the limits of that faithfulness. The human body endures not because it was meant to, but because conditions allow it to continue adapting, one narrowing step at a time. Only when human societies became stable did wear become something that could be clearly seen. For most of history, life ended before slow deterioration had time to dominate experience. Injury, infection, and scarcity interrupted life abruptly. Bodies were used intensely and briefly. Wear existed, but it did not accumulate long enough to form a visible pattern across many years. Stability changed this. Agriculture, settlement, and later industrialization reduced sudden threats and extended survival. With fewer interruptions, the body's gradual changes could unfold fully. What had once been hidden became observable, where shifted from background noise to foreground experience. This visibility transformed how humans understood their bodies. The body became something that could be compared across time. Past strength could be remembered and measured against present capacity. This comparison created a new awareness of decline. Archaeological evidence reflects this transition. In early skeletal remains, signs of stress appear, but they are often overshadowed by evidence of acute injury or early death. In later populations, patterns of chronic wear become clearer. Joint surfaces smooth unevenly. Vertebrae compress gradually. Teeth erode over decades. These traces indicate not sudden failure, but prolonged use. They mark the point where life lasted long enough for accumulation to matter. The body did not change. Time did. As generations overlapped more extensively, wear also became a shared observation. Older individuals were no longer rare exceptions. They became a visible group within communities. Their bodies carried histories that younger members could see and anticipate. This visibility altered expectation. Decline was no longer abstract. It was embodied. The body's future became imaginable. This imagination shaped behavior and social roles. Physical limitation was anticipated rather than surprising. Communities adjusted tasks, responsibilities, and rhythms accordingly. Wear was not a problem to be fixed. It was a condition to be lived with. Modern perspectives often misread this shift. Wear is treated as evidence of malfunction rather than evidence of longevity. In reality, wear became visible precisely because bodies were allowed to persist. Stability did not damage the body. It revealed what constant use inevitably produces. Biological systems that tolerate imperfection accumulate it over time. When time extends, imperfection becomes pattern. This does not mean the body is poorly designed. It means it was designed for use, not preservation. The emergence of visible wear marks a historical boundary. It separates lives shaped by interruption from lives shaped by duration. Only in the latter does aging become a central experience. Before stability, decline was overshadowed by survival. After stability, survival exposes decline. Understanding this reframes the presence of wear in modern aging. It is not a sign that the body is failing more than before. It is a sign that life is lasting longer than ever. Wear is the physical record of that success. The human body was never meant to carry such a record across many decades. When it does, it tells a story not of error, but of extended survival under conditions that finally allow time to leave its mark. As wear became visible, it also became interpretable. Bodies no longer changed in isolation. They were observed across generations, compared within families, and remembered within communities. This comparison introduced a new dimension to aging: anticipation. Younger individuals could see what awaited them, not as an abstract possibility, but as a physical reality embodied by elders. This anticipation reshaped how time was understood. Aging became a trajectory rather than an interruption. The body's future could be imagined long before it arrived. In early human contexts, such foresight was limited. Lives ended unpredictably. The body's fate was uncertain enough that long-term projection offered little value. Stability altered this balance. When death became less immediate, where gained narrative weight. It told a story that unfolded slowly and predictably. This predictability did not come from biological programming, but from prolonged exposure to the same conditions. Repetition created pattern. Pattern invited meaning. Archaeological and historical records reflect this shift in subtle ways. In later settled populations, tools, dwellings, and social structures begin to accommodate reduced physical capacity. Pathways become smoother. Tasks are divided more finely. Living spaces adjust to slower movement. These changes suggest that wear was not merely observed, but expected. The body's decline became part of social planning. Aging was integrated into collective life rather than treated as an anomaly. Modern life often breaks this integration. While longevity has increased, social adaptation has not always followed. Bodies age visibly, but structures around them often remain optimized for peak performance. This mismatch intensifies the sense that wear is a problem rather than a condition. Historically, wear was accepted as evidence of contribution. Scars, stiffness, and altered movements signaled experience. They marked survival through repeated challenge. The body's history was readable and respected. This reading did not require explanation. It was shared understanding. As wear accumulated, it shaped identity. A person was known not only by what they could do, but by what their body had endured. This identity shift softened the impact of decline. Physical limitation did not erase value, it redirected it. In evolutionary terms, this redirection allowed knowledge and coordination to persist beyond peak physical capacity. Wear did not end participation. It altered its form. The modern tendency to medicalize wear removes it from this historical context. Wear becomes something to manage privately rather than something to integrate socially. The body's visible history is hidden or corrected when possible. While this can reduce discomfort, it also isolates the experience of aging. Historically, wear was a shared signal of time lived. It connected individuals to collective memory. The body's marks were not failures, they were records. Understanding this helps explain why wear feels heavier today. It is experienced without the social frameworks that once gave it meaning. Biologically, nothing has changed. Wear still accumulates as life extends. What has changed is how that accumulation is interpreted. The body continues to tell its story through structure and movement. Whether that story is seen as loss or as record depends on the surrounding context. The human body was never designed to last unchanged. When it lasts long enough to show its history, it invites interpretation. That interpretation shapes the experience of aging as much as the wear itself. When wear becomes a shared and predictable feature of life, it begins to shape how entire generations relate to time. The body is no longer experienced only in the present. It is experienced as a passage, moving steadily from capacity toward limitation. This passage is learned not through instruction, but through observation. Children watch elders move more slowly. Adults anticipate changes they have already seen. Aging becomes something expected long before it is felt. This expectation alters behavior. People pace themselves differently. They plan with decline in mind. The body's future is no longer unknown. It is rehearsed socially. In early human contexts, such rehearsal was rare. Lives were uncertain enough that long-term bodily forecasting had little value. Stability transformed this uncertainty into continuity. Continuity allowed wear to become a guide. It suggested what to conserve, what to relinquish, and when to adapt roles. The body's gradual change informed social rhythm. Tasks shifted earlier, responsibility redistributed. Physical demand was managed collectively. Wear did not isolate individuals. It signaled transition within a shared structure. Over time, this collective awareness softened the experience of decline. The body's limits were anticipated and accommodated rather than resisted. Modern societies often lack this gradual accommodation. While longevity has increased, expectations of sustained performance remain high. Wear is visible, but the environment does not always adjust. This creates a sense of friction. The body moves according to its accumulated history, while social systems continue to demand speed, strength, and endurance. The result is not simply discomfort, but a feeling of being out of step with time itself. Historically, wear marked belonging to a later phase of life. Today, it often feels like falling behind. Yet biologically, wear remains what it has always been, evidence of prolonged use under stable conditions. The body has done nothing unexpected. It has responded to repetition by narrowing tolerance and conserving function. What has changed is the context in which this response is lived. Another effect of predictable wear is its influence on memory. When bodily change unfolds slowly and visibly, memory binds experience together. Past effort explains present limitation. The body feels continuous rather than abruptly altered. This continuity can reduce shock, but it can also deepen awareness. Each change is recognized as part of a long arc. The body becomes a timeline, carrying marks of decades rather than moments. In earlier contexts, this timeline was shorter or interrupted. Modern longevity stretches it out. The body records more than it ever did before. This record is not neutral. It shapes how people interpret their own lives. Wear can be read as loss, or it can be read as duration. The same physical signs can signify failure or survival, depending on the story they are placed within. Historically, wear often signified endurance. It showed that a person had lived through repeated cycles of demand. Modern narratives often emphasize maintenance and prevention, framing wear as something to be delayed or minimized. While this reduces suffering, it can also obscure the meaning of wear as evidence of time lived. The human body was never designed to last unchanged. When it lasts long enough to show its passage clearly, it invites judgment. That judgment is cultural, not biological. The body simply continues adapting as it always has. Wear becomes visible because life allows it to accumulate. Whether that accumulation feels heavy or coherent depends on how society receives it. Aging, at this stage, is no longer just a biological process. It is a dialogue between the body's history and the world's expectations. Modern life presents the human body with a quiet contradiction. Conditions have become safer, slower, and more predictable, yet the body itself remains shaped for uncertainty. This mismatch does not announce itself dramatically. It emerges through everyday experience. Fatigue appears without clear cause. Discomfort persists despite rest. The body feels out of rhythm with its surroundings. From a biological perspective, this sensation is not mysterious. The body evolved to function under fluctuating stress, varied movement, and constant adaptation. Modern environments reduce variation while extending duration. The body is asked to remain stable for far longer than it was designed to manage. In early human life, effort was intermittent. Movement alternated with rest. Stress was intense but brief. Recovery followed exertion naturally. Modern routines often invert this pattern. Low-level strain persists for long periods. Posture remains fixed. Attention stays engaged without resolution. The body responds by tightening, conserving, and narrowing its range of function. These responses are adaptive in the short term. Over decades, they accumulate into chronic states. The nervous system remains partially activated. Muscles hold tension. Repair never fully completes because strain never fully ends. This creates the feeling of being worn without having been pushed. The body is responding to a type of demand it was never shaped to interpret. Another aspect of this mismatch lies in how time is structured. Modern schedules divide life into long, repetitive cycles. Days resemble one another. Physical variation decreases. The body thrives on irregularity. It adapts best when stress is followed by release, when movement is diverse, when demands shift. Repetition without relief accelerates wear not because the body is fragile, but because its adaptive mechanisms are overstimulated in one direction. Systems that once balanced use and recovery lose that balance. The body compensates by lowering tolerance. Energy becomes scarce not because it is unavailable, but because it must be rationed carefully to maintain stability. This rationing feels like aging. It is the body protecting itself from continuous low-grade demand. From an evolutionary standpoint, such environments did not exist. There was no pressure to design a body that could endure long periods of comfort punctuated by constant mild strain. Survival demanded responsiveness, not endurance under sameness. Modern life, therefore, exposes a gap between biological expectation and lived reality. The body continues to operate as if variation and resolution will arrive. When they do not, it adjusts by simplifying. Movements become economical. Preferences narrow. Recovery requires more time. These changes are often interpreted as decline, but they are better understood as defensive adaptation. The body is not failing to keep up with modern life. It is refusing to overextend itself in conditions it cannot resolve biologically. This refusal is subtle and often misunderstood. It appears as limitation, but it serves preservation. The human body was never designed to last indefinitely in stable environments. It was designed to survive instability long enough to matter. Modern life reverses that equation. Stability extends, while the body continues to prepare for disruption that never fully arrives. Aging, in this context, becomes the lived experience of that unresolved preparation. As this mismatch persists, the body begins to treat modern life itself as a form of prolonged strain, not acute danger, not physical hardship, but continuous exposure to low-level demand without clear resolution. The body's stress systems were shaped to activate, respond, and then stand down. In early human life, this cycle was frequent and effective. Threat appeared, action followed, and resolution arrived quickly. Modern life interrupts this pattern. Demands remain present without climax or release. Responsibilities extend indefinitely. Attention is required constantly. The body responds as it always has, by maintaining readiness. Over time, readiness becomes fatigue. Systems designed for temporary activation begin operating at reduced efficiency because they are never fully at rest. This is not failure, it is cost management. The body lowers output to preserve coherence. Another layer of this mismatch appears in movement. Early human bodies encountered varied terrain, changing loads, and unpredictable challenges. This variety kept tissues adaptable. Modern environments flatten experience. Surfaces are uniform. Movements repeat. The body adapts by reinforcing narrow patterns. Muscles shorten or weaken selectively. Joints lose range. The nervous system favors efficiency over exploration. These adaptations reduce immediate strain, but they also reduce resilience. When unexpected demand arises, the body struggles not because it is weak, but because it has specialized too narrowly. This specialization accumulates quietly. Each day feels manageable. Years later, the limits are clear. Modern life also alters how the body interprets rest. Rest was once active and integrated into movement. Today, rest often means inactivity. The body is not shaped to recover through stillness alone. Circulation slows. Tissues stiffen. Recovery mechanisms depend on movement to complete their work. When movement is limited, repair remains partial. The body compensates by slowing further, creating a cycle where reduced activity leads to reduced tolerance. This cycle is often described as aging. Biologically, it is adaptation to a context that offers safety without variation. From an evolutionary perspective, such contexts were rare. There was no pressure to refine systems for prolonged mild demand, combined with prolonged inactivity. The body therefore lacks tools to resolve this pattern elegantly. It manages by narrowing function and conserving energy. These strategies extend viability, but they also change experience. Life becomes organized around maintenance rather than engagement. Modern expectations often clash with this shift. Extended life encourages continued output, learning, and participation. The body responds with caution. It limits exposure to strain. It prioritizes predictability. This tension is not psychological alone. It is physiological. The body is enforcing boundaries that were once external. Aging, in this sense, becomes the internalization of limits that the environment no longer provides. Another consequence of modern mismatch is the perception of time pressure without physical urgency. The mind feels rushed, while the body remains stationary. This dissonance taxes regulatory systems. Hormonal rhythms lose clarity. Sleep becomes less restorative. Appetite and energy fluctuate unpredictably. These changes are not signs of disorder. They reflect systems attempting to synchronize under conditions they were never shaped to reconcile. Over decades, the body adapts by lowering expectations. It reduces baseline energy. It lengthens recovery. It favors stability over responsiveness. This adaptation allows life to continue, but it changes how life feels. The body becomes less accommodating, more selective. It does not aim to support constant engagement. It aims to avoid collapse under unresolved demand. The human body was never designed to last in a world where strain is subtle, continuous, and inescapable. It was designed for cycles of intensity and release. Modern life offers duration without resolution. Aging emerges as the cost of enduring that imbalance for long enough to feel it. As this long mismatch settles into daily life, the body gradually abandons the idea of full recovery, not because recovery is impossible, but because the conditions that once allowed it no longer exist. In early human life, recovery was embedded in rhythm. Intense effort was followed by true release. Movement alternated with rest that still involved circulation, posture change, and sensory variation. Modern life offers rest without resolution. The body pauses, but demands remain present in the background. Under these conditions, repair becomes conservative. The body no longer aims to return systems to their earlier state. It aims to keep them stable enough to continue. This shift is subtle, but it changes how aging is felt. Fatigue becomes familiar rather than temporary. Discomfort settles into baseline rather than signaling injury. The body adapts by redefining what is normal. This redefinition is not conscious. It is biological recalibration. Systems lower their expected output to match what can be sustained under continuous demand. What feels like decline is often the body choosing a survivable equilibrium. Another effect of prolonged mismatch is the loss of surplus. Early human bodies carried reserve capacity. Strength exceeded daily need. Endurance surpassed immediate requirement. This surplus allowed sudden response to danger. Modern environments rarely require such response, but they also rarely allow surplus to rebuild. Without varied challenge and resolution, surplus slowly disappears. The body trims what it does not regularly use. Muscle mass declines. Cardiovascular capacity narrows. Flexibility reduces. This trimming is efficient. It reduces maintenance cost. It also reduces the margin for error. When unexpected effort is required, the body struggles because it has optimized away excess. Aging, in this sense, reflects optimization under constraint rather than failure under stress. The body becomes finely tuned to the narrow demands of modern life, at the cost of broad capability. This tuning feels restrictive because modern expectations remain expansive. People expect bodies to be adaptable, energetic, and responsive across long spans of time. The body responds by limiting exposure to what it cannot sustain. It enforces boundaries through fatigue, stiffness, and reduced tolerance. These signals are often resisted or suppressed. Biologically, they are protective. They prevent systems from being pushed beyond their adaptive range. Over decades, this protection shapes identity. Life becomes organized around energy management. Choices are filtered through recovery cost. The body becomes a factor to consider rather than a vehicle to forget. This experience is often framed as loss of youth. From an evolutionary perspective, it is the body maintaining coherence under conditions it was never designed to resolve. Modern life removed many external limits. The body replaces them internally. Aging emerges as the internalization of boundaries once imposed by environment. The human body was never designed to last indefinitely within stable, low-variation conditions. It was designed to respond, recover, and move on. When response continues without resolution, recovery becomes partial and conservative. The body survives by narrowing its commitments. This narrowing allows long life, but it changes how life feels. Aging, at this stage, is not the body breaking down. It is the body refusing to overextend itself any further. When the body reaches this stage, something subtle but important becomes clear. What has been changing all along is not only strength, speed, or resilience, but the meaning of limitation itself. Earlier in life, limits felt temporary. Rest promised recovery. Effort promised improvement. The body was experienced as something that could be pushed and restored. In later life, limits feel structural. They do not disappear with rest. They shape decisions before effort begins. This shift can feel like loss, but biologically it marks a transition rather than an end. The body has moved from expansion to conservation, from possibility to continuity. In early human contexts, this transition often passed quickly. Once the body narrowed its range, survival soon ended. Modern longevity stretches this phase, making it a central experience rather than a brief closing chapter. The body remains present, but its role changes. It no longer supports constant growth. It supports persistence. This persistence is quiet. It does not announce achievement. It simply maintains coherence day after day. From an evolutionary perspective, there was no requirement for this phase to feel meaningful. Meaning was not a biological concern. Yet human awareness fills that space. When action becomes limited, attention turns inward. Memory, reflection, and interpretation take on greater weight. The body's restraint creates room for a different kind of experience. This is not compensation by design. It is a consequence of long life exposing capacities that were once secondary. The body, having completed its primary tasks, no longer demands urgency. The mind continues to seek connection, understanding, and continuity. This divergence creates a final question, one that evolution never needed to answer. If the body was never designed to last, what remains when lasting is no longer possible? The answer is not found in biology. It emerges in how humans live within limits rather than against them. Throughout history, older individuals contributed not by physical output, but by stabilizing social knowledge, preserving memory, and moderating risk. These roles were not planned by evolution. They arose because long-lived bodies made them possible. The body's decline did not erase value. It redirected it. Modern life often obscures this redirection, emphasizing independence and capacity over continuity. Yet the biological reality remains. The body will narrow, it will conserve, it will resist expansion. Fighting this process consumes energy without altering outcome. Living with it opens another mode of existence, one less defined by performance and more by presence. This does not romanticize aging. Discomfort, loss, and frustration remain real, but understanding their origin changes how they are carried. The human body was never designed to last. It was designed to function long enough for life to continue. When life continues far beyond that design, the body adapts by stepping back. What remains is not a failed system, but a completed one, still holding the mind, the memory, and the quiet awareness that survival alone never explained. The final question is not how to make the body last longer. It is how to live meaningfully within a body that has already done what it was built to do. As the body settles into conservation, daily life begins to reorganize around acceptance rather than resistance. This acceptance is not passive. It is an adjustment of expectation. Earlier in life, effort was often aimed at overcoming limits. Later, effort shifts toward navigating within them. This change can feel subtle at first. Activities are chosen more carefully. Energy is paced, rather than spent freely. The body becomes something to listen to rather than challenge. Biologically, this listening reflects accurate information. The body is communicating what it can sustain. Ignoring these signals no longer leads to improvement, only to prolonged recovery or injury. In early human contexts, this phase often arrived close to the end of life. Modern longevity extends it, turning adaptation into a long process rather than a brief transition. During this time, the relationship between body and mind changes again. The mind learns to interpret limitation not as interruption, but as boundary. Boundaries shape behavior without requiring constant negotiation. They define what is possible and what is costly. Living within them reduces friction. This does not eliminate frustration, but it reduces conflict. The body is no longer treated as something that should return to earlier states. It is treated as something that must be maintained in its current one. This shift has historical roots. In societies where older individuals were integrated into daily life, boundaries were respected and accommodated, tasks were adjusted, roles changed gradually. The body's signals were not medicalized or hidden. They were understood as part of the life course. Modern societies often lack this gradual accommodation. Boundaries appear suddenly because expectations remain unchanged. Understanding the body's design helps soften this shock. If the body was never meant to last unchanged, then change itself is not a violation, it is continuation. Another effect of this phase is the redefinition of effort. Effort becomes less about achievement and more about care. Simple actions carry more intention. Rest becomes purposeful rather than incidental. Attention turns toward maintaining equilibrium rather than seeking expansion. From a biological perspective, this conserves resources and reduces risk. From a human perspective, it alters the texture of time. Moments feel less rushed. Priorities narrow. What remains gains clarity because less competes with it. This does not make aging easier. It makes it different. The body still limits, but it does so predictably. Predictability allows adaptation. Over time, the mind learns to align with the body's rhythm. This alignment reduces the sense of betrayal often associated with decline. The body is no longer expected to deliver what it was never designed to provide. Instead, it is respected for what it can still sustain. This respect does not come naturally. It must be learned, often slowly. It emerges when resistance proves costly and accommodation proves workable. The human body was never designed to last indefinitely. Accepting this does not shorten life. It clarifies how life can be lived within its later boundaries. When effort is redirected from restoration to maintenance, and from expansion to coherence, a different form of stability appears. This stability is not strength as it once was. It is continuity. It allows life to proceed without constant conflict between expectation and reality. In this space, the body remains present, not as an obstacle, but as a condition. The question is no longer how to defeat limitation, but how to inhabit it with awareness. When the body has narrowed its range and settled into conservation, the final task is not biological. It is interpretive. The body continues to function within limits it can sustain. The question that remains belongs to human awareness. What does it mean to live inside a form that was never designed to last? Evolution offers no answer, because it never needed one. Its concern ended when survival and continuation were secured. Everything beyond that point is unplanned territory, opened only by extended life. In this territory, the body no longer promises progress. It promises presence. Each day becomes less about reaching new capacity and more about inhabiting what remains with clarity. This shift does not eliminate difficulty. Pain, fatigue, and loss still appear, but they no longer arrive as surprises. They become part of a known landscape. Knowing, the landscape changes how it is crossed. The body stops being an opponent and becomes a boundary. Boundaries do not disappear when resisted. They become workable when understood. For most of human history, few individuals lived long enough to ask this question. Life ended before reflection had time to deepen. Today, reflection extends far beyond function. The mind continues to connect memory, meaning, and time, even as the body reduces ambition. This continuation is not accidental. It reveals a layer of human life that was once secondary and brief. Extended lifespan brings it forward. Meaning does not arise from durability. It arises from awareness moving through change. The body's decline does not erase that awareness. It frames it. Within limits, attention sharpens. Choices simplify. What matters becomes clearer because less is possible. This clarity is not a reward. It is a condition. It emerges when expansion ends and presence remains. From this perspective, the human body did not fail by wearing out. It completed its role. It carried life far enough for awareness to recognize itself across time. That recognition was never guaranteed by biology. It is made possible only because life now lasts long enough to encounter its own limits. The final understanding is not that the body should have lasted longer. It is that lasting longer was never its purpose. The body enabled survival. Survival enabled experience. Experience now faces finitude directly, without illusion. This does not answer the question of why life ends. It reframes what continues until it does. Living inside a body that was never designed to last invites a different measure of value. Not how much can be done, but how fully each moment is inhabited. Not how far the body can go, but how honestly limits are acknowledged. In this space, aging is no longer only loss. It is exposure. It exposes the fact that life was never about permanence. It was about passage. The body carried that passage as far as it could. What remains is the awareness moving through the final stretch, knowing that lasting was never the point.